All right, guys, welcome back. We are here again with a little ACT refresher, practice, and skill building. So let's get to it. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to find the two pieces of information that you're going to need, or rather the two pieces of material. First, as always, on our website, I recommend hitting this ACT goal sheet here. If you open that, you will see a place where you can write down your goal score for each section, and then you'll be able to check out how many you can miss in each section. And what we're going to do today is, as always, a series of 9-minute drills. You can see how many you can miss in one 9-minute drill to be on pace for that score. So we'll go through all 4 sections today. I'll do at least a 9-minute drill in each one, and you can obviously break this lesson up into multiple sittings if you want, or convert these into 9-minute or 18-minute or 27-minute drills, or do a whole entire section if you're building up that endurance. So come and get this. Also, the packet we're going to do today, the ACT group, is not something from Game of Thrones. It is from the crackact.com website, apparently brought to you by crappy Game of Thrones video games. So crackact.com. And again, this website is mega gangster. But if you just scroll down right at the front, we're going to use a fairly recent, or at least recent at the time of this video, December 2019 ACT. This one was given back in December of 2019, before the fun started in 2020. The website is super gangster, like I said, and so you're gonna have to click through multiple sketchy looking pages. Don't click any of these weird ads. Just come down here to where it says the download link. I know your red flag should be going up because that's never a good thing to click. And then, believe it or not, you have to click on yet another one in order to finally get where we want to be. I would suggest just saving this PDF on your desktop. In any case, that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's get to it. First, we're going to tackle the English section. The first thing you always want to do, step 1 of any ACT practice that you're doing, is you need to remember what happened last time. So perhaps you consult your goal sheet and see what you put down for your goal and see which ones you missed last time. Review through any studying you've done, what kinds of concepts get you on this section. Do connector questions get by you a lot? Do you have to be aware of assignment questions, you know, the ones with introductory text here, like number 5, and so forth. So if you need to, pause the video for a sec, put yourself in the right headspace. What do I stink at on this section? What do I got to remember to not mess up on? What do I want to be? When you're ready, go ahead and pause it. We're actually going to tackle section 4 of this. We'll do something a little bit later today. Passage 4 is called Building and Rebuilding the quote-unquote King of Roads. Hint, always read the titles. They tell you a lot about what's going on in these English passages. So, step 1, review what you need to know. And then step 2, I'm going to let you do this yourself. Review or dig into the passage. We'll set a timer for 9 minutes. I'll let you do that on your own. You can pull up the timer from just Google or wherever, or set it on your phone. Go ahead and pause this video when you're ready and complete questions 46 through, I believe 60 will be the last one. You have 9 minutes to do that, assuming you're going to be on pace to finish the whole section. If you need to take a little longer because you can't go that fast, that's okay too. But see how many you can get in accordance with your goals, in accordance with the ones you did before. When you're ready, we'll go over a couple. Go ahead. All right, so assuming you are back now, let's take a look at a couple of these. I'm going to do first several in a row here, and then I'm going to skip a couple. We're going to start with number 46, which, and I always like to do this, even though you don't have to do this on your test because it takes longer, but you might do it on your review if you missed this question. I like to mark up what type of question this actually was. And 46 is just your classic brevity question. Remember, the tiebreaker on the English section is always just go with the shortest one. So even if you weren't even doing this one, J, you know, is physically the shortest. Well, why does it work? Well, first of all, because we don't need, you know, lots of extra words in some of these answers. But the other reason actually has a little bit more to do with sentence structure and kind of verb parallelism. the way the sentence goes is the Columbia River Gorge is 85 miles of, number 1, flowing water, number 3, roaring waterfalls. Those are both things. And so we don't need to be thrown in this there are nonsense in that one. We just want another thing. So tree-covered bluffs works well. It would be even more parallelistic if you had another flowing, roaring, ing gerund form noun there, but it doesn't have to be as long as it's still a noun. Remember, it's noun, 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 or verb. If it's verbs, they generally want to be in the same tense. All right, next up, number 47. We have ourselves our first assignment question. Ding, ding, ding. Note when it doesn't just go into no change or no change. You have some text here. That means we got to do something different. It may not have anything to do with vocabulary, and it does not here. So here, read the instructions. Which choice most clearly indicates that the features of the Columbia River Gorge intimidated road builders and kept them from instructing the highway? It's often a good idea to underline or highlight a certain keyword or words in there that are telling you what kind of thing are we looking for. Now, this one's a little tricky because all of these are kind of negative sounding, but we really want to go for intimidated and kept them from constructing the highway. And if we're being literal about what words mean, which is what you have to do on this thing, even if you don't know what the word daunted means, some of these other ones kind of eliminate themselves. Slowed does not mean kept them. It just means they did it slower, and it does not mean they were intimidated. Challenged, similarly, means maybe there were obstacles, but we weren't necessarily afraid of those obstacles, and we didn't necessarily get kept from overcoming them. And posed problems for, which really is the same thing as challenged. So even if you don't know what the word daunted means, because it's a tough vocab, you might be able to knock these other three out. Daunted, of course, means you were intimidated by. And these also, the other phrase I didn't mention here is would-be road builders, as in they weren't actually road builders. They thought about building a road, but they're like, we can't do it, which covers the kept them part. So that is the best answer, A. The others eliminate themselves, but chip at that one from either direction, which one you have. This is just a straight up, oh, I forgot to write assignment question here. Just going to abbreviate that. You know, I have a dirty mind. And 48, we have our classic connector, punctuation. I just don't know why they love, well, I do know why they love punctuation so much, because you don't know it that well. And kids are constantly screwing up colons and semicolons and periods. But seriously, if you just get on point with these, you can save so much time. This question goes so fast if you're good at this kind of stuff. The first thing I see when I notice I've got a bunch of different punctuation marks in my question is I remember that periods and semicolons and colons are all basically the same thing. Yes, there are subtle differences, although the difference between a semicolon and a period is so subtle you won't ever even need it on the ACT. It just separates two complete sentences. A colon can do that too. The only thing that a colon has to have is the first part has to be the setup, and the second part has to be the answer. With a colon, the second half doesn't have to be a complete sentence. It could just be like list items or something. But if you know that one really well, you just immediately come to answer choice H, because that's the only one that says their design went beyond practicalities. Boom, here it comes. It showcased the scenic grandeur of the gorge. I just gave away the next question. In any case, this is a complete sentence starting here. And so you can't have a comma. You can't have a semicolon or colon and. You can just never do that. This one doesn't work. And the way they wrote it was with what nothing at all. We certainly can't do nothing at all. So whether you just immediately say, aha, that's a perfect use for a colon, which is what happens when you get good with colons, or whether you just eliminate the other three, get this punctuation stuff locked down. Like it can make your score go up and your time go down, which then makes your score go up even more. It's not that complicated a category. It just takes a little while to get used to those. Okay, let me clear my slate here and look at a few more. So that one obviously was H. The answers, of course, are all in the very back of the book. Don't check these. You're relying on me for your answers. Don't rely on me. Go do it yourself. This one, I'm not even going to mark this up. This is just another brevity question. Like, look, it's the shortest one again. Just pick that. Why? Because I already know it's the Columbia River. I already know it's located there. You already talked about that stuff. So remember, if you possibly could get rid of words, you always should on the ACT. We're used to word padding in high school where we're just like, oh, I have to get to 500 words. I'll just throw a bunch of garbage in there and maybe my teacher won't notice. Well, your teacher probably does notice, but they're just too lazy and tired to mark you down very much for that unless they're really good. But in the ACT, they're trying to train you not to do that. That's not good writing, so go with as few words as possible. So D is okay for 49. 50. This is another brevity question where we have also a chance to do something we call read bigger. So we got featuring 7 viaducts and 18 bridges. Columbia Highway was a marvel. Roadside overlooks with benches for sitting by the road. By the road, you mean roadside? So already covered that. We don't need 50 to do that same thing again. G is the same problem. For travelers, who the heck else is it for? The reason I also wanted to bring up 50 is J being the correct answer here. Delete the underlined portion. It's kind of a weird looking answer there. Like every once in a while you'll get this delete the underlined portion. On the English section, that answer is right a lot. Like not all the time, of course, but like maybe 50% of the time it ends up being the correct answer. Why? Because brevity. Obviously, sometimes they throw it in there as a trap, but if you ever can get away with deleting it, in fact, if I ever see that answer trace, my eyes just are like, ooh, that one, I always like that. That's a favorite. Can I get away with it? There will be times where you can't because it makes the sentence grammatically improper, or it deletes really important information or something that was covered in like the brevity unit of our classes. But if you can get away with it, do that. Pick that on the charts. 51. These questions are really, really hard for some people. This is called a word choice question. Write that down. And with word choice questions, sometimes they'll just take a little word. Word choice is another way of saying it's like a look-alike word. In some cases, it will be a word that looks very similar to, like there, or to, or indefinite and infinite, or something like that. This one is what I call the little words, where they just take the ins and the ons and the ofs and those types of words that you just don't really notice, and they mix them around. And they're trying to fool you by making you pick one of the wrong ones. It's like a up when there should be an and, or an on when there should be an in, or something like that. We do see delete the underlined portion. It's not actually going to be correct this time. We'll see why in a moment. But you've got to watch out for these. Now, my advice for word choice questions of all of those types I just mentioned, especially if it's a vocab-y one or a little word one, is sometimes you have to make your own sentence. Now, if you're just very familiar with the phrase take in a view, then you correctly picked that the answer is no change a long time ago and you don't need to hear this explanation. You can skip ahead. But if you didn't know that, if you were struggling with in versus up versus on or something like that, in all cases like this, what I say is to make your own sentence that's very similar. You don't have to recreate the whole entire sentence, just the part in question here. So for instance, to take in or up or on a view. So maybe we change view to something else that you could like look at, like a movie. So, hey, me and my friend decided that we would take in a movie. We decided that we would take up a movie. You're not going to produce it. That seems like you're actually creating a movie. We're going to take on a movie. It's not you versus the movie. We're not going to take a movie. No, take in a movie sounds okay. Oh, okay, so when I made my own sentence and using take, which I do know what that word means, and movie, which is a different way of saying view, yeah, after all, in does sound the best. So that's a good way around word choice questions where you're not really sure what you should do and you're not really sure which words sounds right. Sub in some different ones instead and see if that helps you. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. These other questions, not that they're not valuable and all, but you guys are getting it, and we've got to keep the video from being 10 hours long. I'm going to jump down to number 60, which is another classic one that people get wrong a lot. It's really hard to do these types of questions. Now, this is a category of assignment question, of course. This is what we call a placement assignment question. Now, these can come in a few different forms. Sometimes they'll just say, hey, we have this existing sentence. Where should we put it in? This one's like that, but it's actually adding. Actually, I won't scroll this because we're going to have to move around a little bit here. You're adding a sentence in, and you got to figure out where it goes. But if you ever get asked, where does something go in an English passage, there are always hook clues for you. When I say hook clues, I mean there's always something in here that tells you logically where this goes. I may have covered this in our ACT review lesson 1, but a really obvious and easy example would be like, you know, there are 3 steps to making a bowl of cereal. First, you pour the cereal into the bowl. Second, you put the milk in, or whatever, almond milk if you're a hippie. And third, you eat it. Now, if I was to mix those around, I'd have something like, first, you do this. Third, you do that. Second, you do this. Where should the second go? Well, duh, it goes between first and third. Now, they're not going to be that obvious, but there's always some kind of clue. And here we have this, the rest of the highway. So what highway were we talking about? You have to have mentioned in the previous sentence, among these 4 answer choices, some of the highway, and perhaps it's some of the highway doing well, because then the rest of it fell into disrepair. So if we scan these, just look back for D, C, D, and so forth. Here's D. So by 1954, only a third of the road was still in use. The rest, okay, that works pretty well. That's why D is going to be our answer. But you could also eliminate the other ones. C, the previous part doesn't even really mention a highway. So this one wouldn't be a good pick because they didn't talk about a highway that we can then talk about the rest of the highway. This one does. The Columbia Highway was a marvel, but it mentions the whole highway, not just part of it. So that's one problem with it. Another problem is we have an opportunity to do what we call read bigger, which means just read around a little bit. If we were going to say the Columbia Highway was a marvel, or part of it was, the rest fell into disrepair, well, then we're in a bad tone. We've shifted, and we'd still want to continue on with talking about negatives, and they don't do that. There's like positive stuff going on here. So this one won't work both for a logical sentence flow reason as well as the part versus whole issue that we discussed. And finally, they began constructing a road to connect the towns of the river. Again, they're not talking about part of it. Also, that would be a real jump to they started it and then part of it's in disrepair. That would be skipping a lot of stuff. If you have done a good job reading for the context of this passage, if as you were doing these grammar questions and you were reading it, you kind of knew the flow, that question may not have been so hard for you. And that's, of course, the key to really, really high ACT scores is you do need to find that balancing act of hitting the grammar, but also keeping track of what you're reading during this. If that's harder for you, though, you can still get these placement questions right by focusing on those hook clues that we talked about. They always latch on to some other place, like Velcro. You just need to figure out what the hook is and where it goes. Sometimes there's even one. Okay, so step 1 was to review. Step 2 was to practice. And we've just been doing step 3, review, figure out what the heck happened. Did you hit your goal or did you not hit your goal? What can you do differently? And I want you to take a moment now and try to write down at least one thing that you have learned that if you can remember next time will raise your score. So take a pause here and refresh your notes with the new observations you've gleaned from this exercise. And we're going to move on to the math when you're ready. Okay. Go ahead and take a pause, guys. All right, guys, it's time to jump to math. So for math, we're going to, of course, start with same steps. Go to the ACT goal sheet, again, on our website. Jot down, if you haven't already, what your math goal is, and then come down here and say, oh, okay, so I'm hoping to get a 28, which means on the entire section, I can miss about 20% of them or get 80% right. So that means out of the 9 questions I'm going to do on this 9-minute drill, I can miss 2. So feel free to jot that down first, then go to Crack ACT. Well, I mean, you're already there. Click through the various download links until we get to our math test. So I'm going to let you pick the 9 questions you want to do after you've, of course, reviewed previous math questions that you missed and want to remember. 2 parts to reviewing this. First, what questions generally am I good at? If you're going for a 36 or something, you hopefully are already getting most of them right, in which case you just want to focus on the few that you're getting wrong. But if you have a lower score than that insane high score and you're trying to get a 20 or you're trying to get a 25 or something, just look and see in the past, like, are you really good at questions 1 through 20? Are you really good at questions 1 through 40? And then it's those last 20 that you fall off on. It's kind of 3 different thirds. Like the first 20 questions or so are trying to be sort of easy. The middle 20 are a little bit more advanced, and then the last 20 are a little bit trickier. It's not as ridiculous as the SAT, but there is a little bit of difficulty increase. So first decide, like, all right, yeah, I'm really good at like 1 through 30. I don't miss that many of those, but then after 30 is where it starts to get a little rough. So maybe you want to do questions 31 through 40. Or if you really struggle with a section, just do the first 9 questions, see if you can get those. Or you can jump around a little bit too, that's fine as well. If you're going for a top score, I would suggest try to pick some of the later ones, like in those last 20. But again, what types of questions are you normally strong or weak at? How much do you want to challenge yourself? So first, review, pause the video if you need to, what you've screwed up on in the past and make sure you're keeping it in mind. Second, when you're ready, we're going to do a 9-minute drill. Again, set that timer, and let's get ready to do a 9-minute drill in math. And when you're ready, unpause it, and we'll go over a few. Go ahead. All right, now let's take a look at the answers, which are, as always, in the back of this book, towards page, what's the back here, 54 or so. That's actually the science. No, that's English. So the math's going to be here on page 51. We're going to start with, well, we're going to try to do 1 easy one, 1 medium one, and 1 hard one today. Although I'm going to throw a few passing shots at a few other questions I noticed as we were going. Let's start with 17. This is a good one to kind of begin with. I was actually going to do number 10. Then I realized number 17 is like the same exact problem, just a little harder. What's the slope? Draw it. Like, just make yourself a T-chart, put these points on it, and then draw the line that goes up. How much did you have to go up to get from 4 to 3? Well, you didn't go up, you went down, so that's -1. That's the rise. Over the run, you can see where this is going, or already narrow it down to one of these bottom answers. Actually, all of them except that. But anyway, that is not as good a problem as number 17, I think, where we can do the same thing. Except here, let's tally this up. We're going to draw it again, and I like this one even better because more people have trouble with midpoint than with slope. Slope is hopefully pretty easy if you can just remember rise over run. But anytime I see a geometry problem of any type, and they don't give me a picture, draw the freaking picture, unless you can do it in your head, in which case you don't need me. So endpoints of -6, it doesn't even have to be exactly right, just in the ballpark. Oops, sorry, I was supposed to go up 9. So somewhere around here, like higher than you are far over there, and then 2, and then 5 up here. So the midpoint is just the middle of these. So assuming I drew my thing even remotely to scale, I can probably eliminate anything with a positive number. We're not going right at first, and we're also not going down, so I don't even need to do this. It must be B. Yeah, and if you actually, by the way, I will forgive you if you didn't draw this, if you just noticed, hey, wait a minute, halfway between -6 and 2 is, well, -4. Remember, you find the middle by adding them together and dividing by 2. And then 9 and 5, halfway between that, gee whiz, is 7. Yay, there it is. Oops. Wow, I even wrote the wrong thing. I'm so sorry, guys. -6 and 2, halfway between those would be -2. think I went blind there for a minute. I'm dumb, apparently. In any case, yes, B is the answer because halfway between -6. I mean, draw it if you need to, but -6 on the number line is way over here. Here's 0, so we want like a little bit to the left of 0. Anyway, sorry, forgive me. So that's how we do that. Draw these things out, guys. By the way, I know I talk fast. If I ever go too fast through an explanation, that's what this video is for. Pause it, play it a few times until you get it. Not servicing anybody other than you here, and so take whatever time you need. And if a problem just remains too hard, you don't always have to do all these. You can skip some. Okay, let's scroll down here a little bit. Just want to fire off a quick comment at 23, although we're not going to do it. Here's another geometry question. And in the English section, I talked about how when the last answer choice says eliminate or delete the underlined portion, how that's right a lot. That is not true on 23. When you see an answer choice that says cannot be determined, that's almost never the answer. So in the math section, picking that weirdo one at the end, that's usually not it. It's a narcissist trap for people who think, well, I'm a genius and I don't know what it is, so probably nobody can. Or you just can't. So E is usually not right. You better be darn sure it's E. Also, just looking at this thing, that's not 80 degrees. This whole thing is 90. This isn't most of it, so I would not pick C, D, or E. Hopefully you did figure out which one it is. I'm not going to do this one, but sometimes you don't even need to do much thinking to knock a couple of them out. For 29, let's do that one for our immediate one. Oh my word, look how scary and confusing this is. This is not like anything I've ever done in school. Right, that's not the point of the ACT. We already know your grades for how you do in school. This is a problem that looks very daunting algebraically, but that's where make up numbers comes in. What if I just said that m was equal to 0? Well, then I'm not even allowed to do A, so A cannot be the answer because it's supposed to be true for all positive. Huh, sorry, we can't even do 0 anyway. Let's pretend for a second that that word said possible, in which case, by the way, that's why it's not possible, why it's positive, because they don't like to break math. Anyway, hey, you even misread that. It doesn't matter. The answer is going to be the same thing. But in case they didn't say positive, you could pick 0. You could also pick 1. Although I will say the dangers of picking 0 and 1 is you often will get like lots of answers that work. I'm not actually even going to pick 1 because as I was looking at this, I kind of noticed that it seems like it always works. And that does happen a lot with 1. We're going to actually pick a little better number here. Slightly different than 1. How about 2? It's good to pick a variety of numbers. If they did let us pick anything, picking a small positive number, picking a 0, picking a negative. If you really have to, you can pick a fraction. That'll usually destroy any problem. But since this is even easier than I thought, we can get away with just picking 2 here, which is going to knock out a whole bunch of these. Because 2 is not smaller than 1/2. Square root of 2 is not bigger than 2. 2 is not bigger than 4. 2 is smaller than 3, so that one seems, well, I shouldn't actually circle it yet, but I should say this one so far is okay. Once I get to here, though, I will see that, in fact, the square root of 3 is smaller than 2, because square root of 4 would be equal to 2. Picking 2 narrowed it down to just D. You could try picking other numbers, but obviously don't make it too hard on yourself. By the way, if anybody saw this algebraically, good for you. But the reason that this is the answer is, what if you just subtracted an m from both sides? Well, wouldn't you have 0 is smaller than 1? Well, yeah. Yeah, it is, always. So that's algebraically why it works. That's simplifying is the other faster way to do this. But we don't always see that. A lot of people see 29, they just freak out, pee their pants, and give up. Don't have to. When you're feeling scared, that's a good place to pull out your secret weapon, make up numbers. Let me just scroll through and insult a few others of these problems. 37 is another good place for, I guess you could make up numbers here if you wanted to. That might be a lot of work though. You could though, if that was the only way you could think of to do this, make up numbers like, ooh, maybe I would pick 0 in this case. Oh yeah, that would actually be sweet. So totally do pick 0 for 37. 1 wouldn't be too bad. But you can also just simplify this. Like factor this out. This is the difference of two squares, remember? It's x plus 3, x minus 3. That's the fastest way to do it. Then just eliminate the stuff that is doubled up on the top and bottom and go from there. 43 was the hard one I wanted to do. And I know this comes from a big part of a problem. Excuse me, a big multi-part graph problem, which normally are more tedious than they are hard. It's just a lot of like busy work that you have to look up. Again, just like the science, make sure you understand the basic idea of the graph. Once you get that, just go into the answers and focus on the information that's relevant rather than memorizing every little piece. 43 gives people the heebie-jeebies because they completely forgot what a matrix is, and it's very cruel of the ECT to even bring these up. Take a little comfort though, guys, when the ECT does throw something at you that's really kind of high level sounding, like sort of exponents. Imaginary numbers would be a good example. Logarithms is another one. Matrices. They're usually like the easiest possible logarithm or matrix problem that there could be. You're probably just rusty on this. So if you missed this one, you probably just kind of forgot how these work. Matrices are just like fancy ways of multiplying. So first we have to look and see what they're asking. They're saying we've got elephants, lions, and giraffes. This is actually kind of important to remember this order of elephant goes first, then lion, then giraffe. So ELG. And those numbers are 55 and 10. And they're going to stick with that same order, ELG here. And so the order, well, this is not going to be helpful, but it always has to go 55, 10, 55, 10, 55, 10, whether it is horizontal or vertical. Well, it does matter, but it doesn't matter if you're just trying to go in order. The reason that's not helpful here, but where this is helpful is we need to keep that same order for elephants, lions, and giraffes when we scroll back up. And we needed to go elephant, 600, lion, 200, and giraffe. So it needs to go 600, 200, 800. Which ones even do that? So 600, 200, 800. Let me... so it needs to go 600, 200, 800. Okay, A checks out so far. This one doesn't. 600, 200, 800. Okay, that one checks out. This one doesn't, nor does that one. So it's either A or C, just because of the order of the animals. So they threw you a bone there, even if you don't know what to do next. Now this problem is, I'm especially mad at this problem because this is sort of like almost, well, I would, not high level matrix, but like it's one step beyond the most basic version of matrices, which is you're just going to multiply this first number by this first number, this first number by that first number, and this first number by this first number. C looks like you could do that too, but the format of matrices is supposed to do what A does. It's supposed to be horizontal first and then vertical like that. That's annoying. You're supposed to know that, but that's like, this is actually the hardest matrix problem I've ever seen on the ACT. And it was that hard because they made you remember that it's supposed to go sideways first and then up, down, and up the other way around. Every other matrix problem I've ever seen doesn't even make you remember that much. They're just like, do you remember that you multiply this by that, and that by that, and that by that? Or you don't even have to do it, just that's what you would do. That is just a real quick matrix review in case that was something that you skipped or got wrong because you just didn't remember that basic concept. Remember, there's really two ways to improve on math questions. Well, an overall strategic way is to know when not to do problems and so forth. But as far as you actually doing problems, if you missed a problem, you can either learn the math, like if you just forgot the matrix math there, relearn the math, dust that off, and then you'll be able to get it. The other way is to learn a different way to do the problem, learning one of those tricks. So don't be too proud to try the tricks, but don't be too dumb to learn the math. If you can do both, then you'll have two weapons to kill any bad guy, and that's where you start getting scores in the 30s. All right, I did say I was only going to do one hard one, but I'll do one more. Let's do 51. which is kind of a tricky one. You actually got to think about this a lot, but I always want you guys to be keeping in the back of your minds tricks, strategies, ways to narrow this down a little bit. And 51 has a pretty cool way to get this narrowed down almost immediately to just 2 answers. So what we've got to do here is first read the problem. 120 liter solution is 5% salt. And an 80 liter solution is 15% salt. A combined solution is what percent salt? Well, normally if you had 5% and 15%, you're trying to find the average, you would just go to 10, right? Well, not on this problem because there's not the same amount of each one. There's more of the lighter salt solution. So we're going to end up not at 10, but at something a little closer to 5. And I kind of already like B because A, I don't know, that's getting really close. Like, isn't this 15% going to do anything? So I don't know, maybe I guess B, but I know it's either B or A. Maybe I could be off a little and it is in fact A. That would be a great way to get this problem narrowed down quickly, even for those of you who don't usually make it to problem 51. This is why it's worthwhile at the end of your time to just glance and see if there's anything you can narrow down at least. Now, how could we get it the rest of the way? I mean, you can do a little kind of eyeballing, mental estimating sort of stuff, but here's a simpler way. What if we threw this 120 liters and this 80 liters all into one tank? Well, how many liters do we have total? 200, right? All right. Well, 5% salt, I can actually figure out what that is. So if 5% of 120 liters is salt, you can just do a quick calculator multiplication and figure out that if 5% of 120 is how much salt we have, that's going to give me 6 liters of salt. And then the rest would be water. For the other one, we just do that same multiplication. Again, this goes way faster with a calculator, but if this one's multiplied by 15% salt, this is going to be, I believe, 12. Yeah, because 8 and then another half of 8 would be 4. So 12 liters. Sorry, I'm too lazy to get my calculator, so I'm doing this the dumb person way in my head. Add those together, you get 18. And, you know, you could throw this in your calculator too, but you also might say, well, this is like double 100, and this is like double 9. So they say we just divided both sides by 2. You can manipulate fractions that way as well. And of course, the answer is 9%. So try this, guys. See which ones of these you missed. I'm sorry we didn't go over all of them here, but email me if you have ones you still want to go over. Ask a friend. You don't necessarily need me. Nice thing about the ACT is that although there are dirty tricks and stuff like that, really all these questions are based on math. They all can be done mathematically. Many of them can also be done with a trick. So if you have a savvy math friend, they may be able to tell you the math way. And if you have a very clever friend, he may be able to tell you the BS way that doesn't involve any math. Either way, learn how to do a couple of problems you didn't get right just now, and that will raise your score. So go back to that goal sheet, record your response and your result. Think about how it went, make some notes, write them down here, write them into math problems, take a picture of them with your phone, something so that you'll remember. All right, when you're ready, marking that up after you've paused and unpaused here, we will move on to the reading. All right, we're picking up some speed now for the reading. Just quickly write down your goal score. And of course, think about the numbers that you can get wrong in this 9-minute drill. The reason we use 9 again is because it divides very nicely into, that's about how long you have to do one reading passage. Technically 8 minutes and 45 seconds, but it's how long you have to do the one English passage, and of course 9 math questions. For the science, well, it's about 9 science questions too, but we'll get back to that in a second. Actually, 9, is it? Well, we'll cover that later. So anyway, write down that. Keep in mind, if you're trying to get, let's say, a 25, you can get about 30% of the questions wrong, so 3 of them on this passage we're about to do. Let's head over to passage 3 on your reading section of that same practice test. This is going to be a fact passage. In our first review lesson, we did a we did a fact passage. This is going to be a story passage. Usually passages 1 and 3 on most ACTs are the story passages. They're called things like prose fiction or literary narrative, or passage 3 is almost always a humanities passage. They're a little bit more about the characters than they are about just what the author is trying to tell you in the fact passages. So we're going to read this, and when we're going to read this, we're going to keep in mind who are the characters, how do they feel about things, and because humanities sometimes gets closer towards things like history, social science, this one's a little bit social sciencey, there is going to be a little bit like, okay, still what is the point the author wants to make? So in some cases, these are a little bit hybridy. Regardless, we want the main idea. As you read, you're going to mark it up, mark main ideas, write notes in the margins, whatever you have to do to get that main idea. If you're an amazing reader or have a photographic memory, maybe you don't have to take too many notes, but we want to get that main idea. Now, before we start again, review what happened last time you did a timed reading section. What types of questions did you miss? Now, usually the ways that people can improve on this section comes down to identifying two different things. One, what part of the question did you screw up on? Did you screw up because you didn't do a very good job reading the passage? Did you screw up because you misread the question? Or did you understand what the question and the passage were about? You just got tricked by one of the wrong answers. Having trouble with my fingers. So think about where you go off the most. And if it's the reading passage part, maybe you just spend a little bit more time. Don't try to get through all 4 of them. You could take up to 12 minutes on this passage if you were going to only do 3 of the passages. Think about, do you often misread the question, in which case take more time reading the question, rephrase it in your own words, or are you just getting it narrowed down to 2 and then picking the wrong one, in which case we really want to study the wrong answer types. That's the other thing you want to be thinking about. On questions you've missed in the past, particularly when you got it narrowed down to 2 or something and you picked the wrong one, what kind of wrong answer did that turn out to be? Was that a never said that? Was that a too extreme? Was that an out of scope? Was from the wrong part or had the wrong level of focus to it? So try to think, what types of questions do I always goof up on? I remember I personally used to mess up on never said that's a lot. I would pick answer choices that were true in real life. I had read them somewhere else and thought, yeah, that's true. Forgetting that the rules of the ACT aren't about what's true in real life. It's what did they literally say here? And so only after did I roll my eyes and say, okay, you stupid test, I guess your rule is that it doesn't matter if it's true in real life. It only matters if you technically said it with some synonym or support somewhere. Once I did that, I started getting more questions right. And that's the key. It doesn't really matter whether you like the game or not. You just want to game the game. So think for a sec, pause the video. Let's get in the mind space of what do I need to do better this time? What did I screw up last time? And if you're watching this video multiple times in a row, what happened the last time after I said these words? When you feel like you're ready, you can go ahead and begin section 3. Set a timer for, if you want to be very accurate, 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Just round to 9 minutes, or you can take more like 11.5 minutes or so if you're going to only try to do 3 of these passages. So read passage 3, do all the questions 21 through 30, and when you're ready, unpause, and we'll go over a couple. Go ahead. Okay, let's take a look at question 21. These first 2 are big, broad, global questions. Some of the questions are big, broad ones. You probably don't need to look back for those very much. You just want to remember what the main idea was about. Then there are medium questions and then very small, detail-y questions. We'll look at 1 or 2 of those as well. Those, it's totally fine to look back on. But for this first one, the passage as a whole can be described as, and here's a good chance to check. By the way, often the first question is a global one, but not always. And so one way to check to make sure you actually got a good main idea is maybe go find this big, broad, global question and do it first, just so, well, that's still fresh in your mind, and to make sure you actually did a good job getting that main idea. This one, if I was marking this up, You know, I would say something about how this passage kind of meandered between being about like a place being a good place for a memory, and then it got away from places and it started talking more and more about things that affect memory, and we ended up actually talking a lot about photography and how like photos aren't really great for memories because they, well, a lot of detailed reasons we can remind you. And then we actually wound up back at the end talking about places a little bit again. So maybe you're a little confused. Maybe you're like, is this about memory and how places are so great because that's where it started and ended? Or since they spent so much time talking about photography, is this really a passage about photography? As we'll see, it's possible that it can be kind of a little bit about both. Looking through these, summary of a childhood incident. Well, yeah, they did do that at the very beginning. If they left it at that, I don't think that would be good. But they do say then, followed by reflections on how the memory of that incident has changed. No, this is still too specific to just the memory, or just that incident and the memory about it. This was broader. It was about the idea of memory in places and photos in general. This one seems like it does that. It's written very broadly and very vaguely, but that is not a bad thing. Remember that as opposed to in the English where detail sometimes can be good, we don't like things too detailed in this section. We like big generic answers. Like if the answer choice is an event or a topic, but like how could that be wrong? It's not a nice answer, but it's not wrong, and that's what the correct answer is in this section. Account of the author's lifelong interest in a hobby. No, that's too extreme here. An explanation for why the author's opinions changed. Never said why. All you need is one word that ruins it. Or you can just say, oh, I like B. 22 is another kind of broad one, although it gets a little more supportive. What best supports the author's, the passage's central claim? Accuracy, kind of, but no, it actually said the opposite of this. It's not improved by viewing photographs. It's actually inhibited. Visiting a place evokes clearer and more accurate memories of conversations or photographs. Yes. That's the perfect combination of place and memories is better than photographs, just like kind of what we are hoping for. Good global main idea answer choice is going to contain all of the elements of what we read, not just part of it. That would be too detailed. That would be an out of scope. To only talk about photography would not be the main idea of this passage. To only talk about going to a place would not be the main idea. The main idea is really about. And if you find an answer that's perfect, you don't have to read the others. I mean, you can find the words that make these things wrong, but our goal is to get the right answer. The fastest way is to read the passage well, make a good prediction, and then find the one that matches. And all students are capable of doing this sometimes. Really good test takers on this section and or people who've gotten really experienced at this can do that a lot of the times, but usually it's a combination of the two. My advice would be to try to do that if possible, but have absolutely no hesitation in saying, I don't know, maybe it's G, maybe not, let me look and let me go and eliminate as many as I can. I find it easier to narrow it down and then between two figure out which one's more wrong and then just leave the last man standing as the right answer than it is to just say, oh, G is so perfect, nothing else could be right. That's hard to do sometimes. So don't be afraid to attack it from both directions. Either find the right one or kill the three wrong ones. All right, let's do two more here. We've spent a fair amount of time on this in lesson one, so we'll keep this high and tight. The author's tone when recounting his visit to the waterfall. So overall, the tone is not really critical. It's the tone when visiting the waterfall. Well, the author liked the waterfall and it brought back nice childhood memories. So certainly something positive. And even more than positive, like really taking me back, trip down memory lane. So just knowing that it was positive would be enough to get rid of the gloomy. And pleading is not really, well, it's not positive. You could argue that pleading is negative, or probably I would say it's neutral. Depends on what you're pleading for, or why, or how you're doing it. But it's certainly not as positive as we're hoping. Joking can be, but that was off tone as well. It wasn't making jokes about stuff. That only leaves this fancy vocabulary word, reverent. Quick side note on vocab. Vocab is not a big part of the ACT. Never was. The SAT was always the vocab test, and it's not really anymore either. But you can attack vocab questions if you don't know a vocab word by narrowing down the others, or if like joking was perfect, which it's not, we could pick that and say, well, it's probably not reverent then, because how could reverent be so good that joking was wrong? Well, no, it wasn't joking, which leads us with reverent. But another vocab thing you can do is think about what words look alike, or excuse me, what they look like. If you happen to speak any Romance languages, or even closer, like Germanic languages, like German, and it looks like a word from one of those languages, it probably means something similar. Or another word in English, like reverend. Isn't that like a minister or something? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, it's a good thing. Somebody who is a reverend gives reverence to God, or whatever it is that they're a reverend of. Usually it's a Christian term, but it doesn't matter. So reverie or reverent, those are all positive words. Reverence, or being reverent, is being respectful, being a little bit in awe of. I mean, awe is a little too extreme there, but this fits well with this person being like, oh man, wow, this is awesome. All right, let's do the last one. Finally, a more detailed question. The main idea of the second paragraph. That would be a place to go back and review. So there's absolutely no shame in just saying, oh crap, I forgot what this paragraph is about. So usually the first sentence helps us here. Places hold memories better than people and better than photographs. We should check maybe just the last sentence or one more sentence just to make sure. It gets into family and people. Becomes impossible to distinguish an original memory from the altered version that emerged from conversation. You might also have left a good note or kind of remember this from having read it, 2 minutes ago. It is not really a paragraph that's that much about place anymore. We just got done talking about that. And it's actually not really about photographs, even though they awkwardly mention photographs here in this first line. It's really more about the people part. What this is it's kind of a topic sentence for this paragraph and the following paragraphs, where they then hit the photographs point. But this one's just about how talking to people about a memory, not that helpful. So this is too generic. Here. This one is too generic. Frequently reminiscing changes one's memory. Yeah, that's pretty good. Reminiscing with other people helps preserve. No, don't get so hung up on a word that you saw that you fall in love with that one, when in fact it's saying the opposite of what you want. Family members, saw that before. Better evoke one's memories than non-family members. What? Well, I mean, that's probably true. I mean, if you think about it, but they never said that. So you don't have to worry about what's probably true or not. Did they say that? No, they did not. And so we're left. Couple just overall notes. Common thing people do to screw up on questions like 24 is they get too focused on a particular word they saw or a particular phrase that was in there. It does not ever matter what the words and the phrases are. Not saying that just because you see a word you saw before that makes it wrong, but that's never the point. The point is always, what does it mean? Using synonyms or a different way of saying it is a totally ACT and SAT kind of thing that get you to maybe pick the wrong answer even though it meant the same thing. Meaning the same thing is good. Using a word that you saw before is not good and very often a trap. Well, when I say not good, I don't mean bad. I just mean that doesn't make the answer right. You have to think about what's underneath. Okay, good work on the reading. Check the other ones, see if you can figure out why they are wrong. Write down in the margin, like let's say that I did pick H originally, and then I'm like, oh no, I got it wrong. That kept me out of my dream college. Write down why. Was it because you didn't review enough? Was it because you misinterpreted the question? You thought it's a third paragraph? Or I would guess the most common reason someone might pick H was because they got hung up on a particular word. So don't get hung on a word. And it may take you several times of leaving yourself this note before you get it. Humans don't always learn everything the first try. You may have to screw up the same way a bunch of times before you stop doing it. You might have to date a lot of bad men or women before you're like, wait, that doesn't make me happy. I guess I shouldn't have gone out with 16 of them. I should have learned it the first time. Yeah, you're human. You can't always learn it the first time. But do try to make a note. You know, keep a picture of your agony in your phone so that next time you're thinking of swiping wrong way on a Tinder person, better. You guys shouldn't be on Tinder. You're young. All right, enough. Let's move on to science. You guys know the drill by now. Make your goals here. Write your sheet section down here, what you're going to do. Step 1, go to the past. Step 2, go to the present. Step 3, go to the future. Past means review your previous science. What types of passages have you done well on? What types have you not done well on? Today, we're going to try to do 2 slightly harder ones. There are some ones that are not so hard in this section. So if you want to try those, that's great. But I'm going to do answers for the ones with, it's like 23, no, it's like 21 to 26, and then 33 to 37. So if you want to make sure you get some answers, you could try those. But those are perhaps more difficult ones that don't feel like you have to. You can just try whichever ones you like. But I want you to think about which ones you've done well on in the past and which ones you haven't. Why are you getting them wrong? Remember, the arc with science is spend just enough time so that you get the main idea of the passage. The answers are usually going to come from the graphs. Read the text if you need to. Some people are fast and just like to read the text. But again, do not get all hung up on the text. If there's some sciencey concept you don't understand, you probably won't need to understand it to get all the answers right. You can always come back and spend more time if you need to. But it just depends on your preference. I know I always tell people, you know, don't bother with the text unless you need it. And then, of course, I find myself reading some of the text sometimes, but it's often redundant. And truly, most of the answers will be found in the graphs. There is that one passage that doesn't have any graphs, though, and we're actually going to look at that one here. But for now, let's do a, let's see, well, help me do this math. You've got usually 40 questions in 35 minutes. So you have around a minute per question, maybe even a little more than that. So really you should be able to get through like 10 questions or so in 9 minutes. Typically this is around 2 passages, although these passages are a little bit longer than average in this section. So maybe give yourself 12 minutes or something thereabouts. In any case, I'll let you decide exactly how many minutes you're going to do. I'm going to take, let me just double check real quick. 6, yeah. So I'm going to do 6 of them. Oh, by the way, I have to tell you guys before you start, the download from crackact.com has got the last 2 pages transposed. And so it looks like the last passage has like 10 questions in it, but it's actually passage 5 that has the questions 27 through 33 on page 47, and then passage 6 has the ones that are questions 34 through 40. So you have to reverse those 2 pages. And I've reversed it in the version I'm looking at here, but yours may be backwards. In any case, we'll take about 1/3 of the time that we would normally get to do these 2 passages. And so 1/3 of 35 is just under 12 minutes. So take a little longer with this one. When you're ready, go ahead and do 2 passages of your choice in approximately 12 minutes, maybe a little less, maybe a little more if you're not going to do them all. And when you're ready, pause. Okay, let's dive into a couple of these. First one I want to look at is the last one. This weird harmonic something or other, wires being like cranked on a pulley, and there's an oscillator that's making the thing go like jump ropey. It's basically making a bunch of sine curves, if you're a real nerd. Do remember also italics are words you've never seen before, so don't bother looking them up. They may explain what they mean. You may not even need to know that. You actually don't really need to read much of the text to do this one. But it is nice to look and see what's going on here and see that we've got these different shapes that emerge on different harmonics, whatever the heck that means. I'm noticing a trend that these numbers seem to get bigger as our harmonics increase. I don't know or care why, but that might be something I notice. And then first harmonic O, when they're talking about TN, whatever that is, it actually gets smaller as we go down in all the cases. Okay, I don't really get the science, but I see what the graphs are saying, so let's dig into a couple of questions. Some of these, as always, are quite easy. I mean, look at 34. Based on the sketches made in experiment 1, the string showed in figure 1 is vibrating in which harmonic? So this guy, it's going up, then down, then up again. It's got like 3 bumps. Doesn't that look like 3, the third harmonic? And sure enough, the answer is H. I mean, some of these are, I call these point and click questions. If you don't even have to have a brain almost. You just finger moves up primordially and points at the right answer. So don't overthink it. It would be hard to underthink that one. Now, there are some definitely harder ones, and that's why I wanted to do this, because this passage gets a little tricky. It's actually going to make you use your brain a couple of times. Let's jump here down to 36. One reason that this one's hard is because although I've seen string Y, X, and Z before, 1 centimeter in length would have a mass. The same mass. What? I don't remember them talking about mass in any of my graphs. Yeah, they don't really. They talk about it in the text. And so you're going to have to go find mass, which is extra confusing because they don't even use the word mass. They use grams. And yeah, maybe you could argue that's actual science, which I've stated that the ACD doesn't really do. Although, I mean, you know, you're super massive. Like, would you tell a girl that on a date? Probably not. Why not? Well, that's weight. That's sense. Oh, right, mass is weight. You can kind of common sense that out. They're asking us about string Y's weight, which per centimeter, whatever. It just means that it's 8 grams per centimeter versus string 1, which is just a dinky little dude here. Let me make a little drawing here. I'll make full use of my drawer. Oh, actually, I don't think it looks thickness. Oh, yes, it does. Watch this. So here's X. String X is just like a little string. And then string Y, well, is a little fatter. And then, oh my God, string Z is just a straight up chunk. Look at that big boy. 16 grams per centimeter. Oh my word, look at that snake. So string X is dinky, string Y is medium, this is big boy. So when they ask you 1 centimeter of this, so let's just chunk it up a little bit. Like just 1 little centimeter of that would have the same mass as how much? Well, I don't think it's gonna have the same mass as really like anything of string Z. It would have to have just the tiniest little sliver. By the way, you can eliminate 2 of these because they're not the same. So 1 centimeter of this is not going to have the same as 1 centimeter of the others. That narrows it down to 2. And then 1 centimeter of this, in order for this guy to have as much mass, you'd have to have like a lot more of this. In fact, you'd have to have 4 times as much of this 2 to get up to this 8. Oh, that's where the 4 comes from. Anyway, freeze this picture and refer back to it if you need to in a moment, but that's going to lend us towards answer choice. String X would have 4 centimeters like that one, because it can't be 1 because they're not the same. So it can't be this one and it can't be that one. And string Z is so massive, that would be like a chain as opposed to a rope as opposed to a thread. Anyway, visualize it however you want, but that actually required you to think a little bit. So I don't know, that's too much thinking this late in the test. You can always skip that one. 37 is another one that sounds like it requires thinking, or God forbid, almost actual science knowledge. Again, I think you can kind of muddle your way through this. If you don't remember significant digits from math class, which you very well may not, maybe your math class didn't even teach you this, it's also in italics, which means it's never been stated before, so you don't even have to look this one up. You just kind of have to think about it. You know what a digit is, and significant means important. And so how many important digits are there in table 1? Well, let's look at table 1. Table 1 seems like it always has 3 numbers. Like, this number is important. You can't just change that 1 into a 2. That 9 is important. That'd be different if it was a 6. And then why put the decimal if it's not important? So it kind of seems like there's 3 important digits, which is why the answer is D. So maybe that's really easy, or maybe it's so hard that it's easy, or maybe it's so easy that it's hard. I don't know. The point is, some questions like that first one are just like points at the answer choice. Others are going to make you think. And if you have to think, you know, try to just think logically. You're not going to really need to know much science. It's not going to necessarily hurt. But I have had kids who are really good at chemistry or something get questions wrong because they're bringing in information that wasn't mentioned in the passage. And again, that assumes that you understand the science better than this experiment, or that this experiment was operating correctly, which may or may not be. So keep those kinds of questions in mind. Let's hop backwards in time to the one passage that doesn't have any pictures. That's passage 4. And we haven't done one of these yet in either this or the first ACT review set. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm only going to do one question from it. But do remember, this passage is a lot more like a reading section than it is like science. You do have to read this one, I'm afraid, because there's no graphs to pull the answers from. So if you really like reading, you probably would want to do this one, and you might even want to do it first. Like, go find this one and bust it out right away when your brain is still in reading mode after section 3. If you do not like this one, or you don't like reading, or both, maybe you don't do this one at all, or at least do it at the very end. You are going to do it, though. You treat it a little bit like we treat a paired passage, which means we take the main idea of any intro text, which is not very thorough here. They're just saying that we got 4 students see that a plant could have a green stem or a purple stem, and then they all argue about why, whether it has to do with sunlight or chlorophyll or the genes or phosphorus or whatever. Ugh, you got to keep a lot of people straight. Now, if it was only like 2 scientists or students, I would suggest you go kind of gunning for student 1 first and then student 2 next. And there might be some questions that you can do. Like, you actually could do question 21 here without reading student 3 or student 4. So maybe that cuts your work in half a little. It's not that useful because with 4 of them, like, most of the questions are going to involve multiple students. Maybe we could do, oh no, a lot of, anyone's that ask about students 1 through 4 is going to require you to have read everything. Let's take a look at question 25. This one does make us only look at 1. Students 4 explanation, you can review that if possible. If a purple stemmed plant and a green stemmed plant are crossed and they produce both purple stemmed and green stemmed offspring, then gene Q, genotype of the parent with the something must be something. Okay, this sounds like a lot and your brain might reel a little bit, but try to like focus down onto the one thing you actually need to know here. How do we get a purple plant or how do we get a green plant? This guy says that, here's the key, you've got to have 2 little q's in order to get purple. That's the only way that you can get purple, is to have 2 little q's. There's 2 other options, big Q, or big Q, little q, but these do not produce it, they produce green. So if we wanted to summarize that, let me mark this up a little bit. You could say If the genotype is little q, then you get purple. And if you get either big Q, little q, or big Q, then you get green. Pencil. It's just not fun. Selected red. Is it still, oh, it's still chonk. You can't, it's too much chonk. Okay, so if we get some of both, that means we got some of these, and then I don't know what, but we got some of these. So what that means is that if you got, you know, daddy plant and mommy plant here, I know plants don't have genders, but bear with me. If they are making, and we don't know what their types are, but if they're making little q's, and then they're making big Q question mark, because all I need is one big Q, and that doesn't matter what the other one is, and I got green. Well, that means that somebody's got to be providing a little q, right? So we can't have just everybody's got big Q's. So it's not going to be that one or that one. And we also can't get a purple stem from having this. This one's just impossible. You can't, if you have that, you don't have it. In fact, same is true of this one. In fact, maybe it's easier to eliminate A and B just by saying, well, that's not how you get purple. So one of these has got a big and a little, and perhaps the other one's got two littles. Because one of these has got to be QQ, right? One of these has got to be purple. So let's say daddy's purple. And then mommy, in order to lend a big one in here, is going to have at least one big one. So the green stem has got to be Q, little q, because it has to, right, yield another. So bear with me if that wasn't the cleanest explanation ever, but think about it a little bit more and decide, is that the kind of question that I want to do? 3 out of 4 of the questions that we did involve some thinking, which is more than you're normally going to see, but of course we don't need to review the ones that just involve you pointing and clicking at stuff. So work on those, try to figure out, you know, more quickly which ones are going to have which ones you're going to have an easier time with. Where are there going to be more point and click questions? And no matter how many of these passages you're going to do, try to hit those first. All right, so guys, you can keep practicing any of these 4 sections that we just did by replaying this video and doing the same thing. Obviously, my explanations won't be helpful if you're doing a different section, but it's the same 3 steps over and over again: past, present, future. Review the past to think about the mistakes you've made and where you've been strong. Do one in the present to see if you can improve upon those, and then, whether you hit your goal or not, plan for the future. Write down any lessons that you want to learn. They could be good lessons too. If you hit your goal, well, how did that work? How did you do that? Like, make yourself a note for next time so it'll go easier. We're not going to talk about the essay today, but I will just leave you with the 3 reminders of the things that you want to remember to do on your essay if you're about to go into your actual ACT. Number 1, please mention all 3 perspectives, even if it's just for 1 sentence at some point. Say, I disagree with perspective 2, or perspective 1 is partially right, or perspective 3 most closely fits my perspective. You do need to mention your own as well in that. So make sure to mention actually the words perspective 1, perspective 2, perspective 3. You must include examples. They can be made up. They can be from history. They can be from school. They can be from books. It doesn't matter, but you can't just go on in vague generalities and say, I don't know, no, all classes are equally important for preparation of college. Some people might think one type of class is more important than another type of class, but they would be wrong. Give examples, like to argue that an English class is more important than an art class disregards, you know, every painting that Monet ever created that has inspired people to still survive and thrive in this world, even if they're not skilled with numbers and letters. You're kind of just BSing these examples sometimes, but you got to include something to back us up. Better yet, give examples from your own life. Give examples you can think of from the real world. And number 3, try to get onto that 3rd sheet of paper. I know length is a lame thing to base your score on, and there is no difference between a 3-page essay and a 4-page essay, or even a 2.25-page essay and a 4-page essay. But there is a difference between a 1-page essay and a 2-page essay. You just aren't going to have enough time to get across all that you need to impress them into giving you top scores if you're writing a page and a half or something. So see if you can fill up 2 sides of the sheets of paper. Get on to that third. With that, I leave you guys. Good work. Keep up the good work. Keep doing this. Keep drilling. Past, present, future. Remember, same damn questions every time. Pardon my French. Hopefully that will give you. All right, guys. Good stuff. Keep up the good work. We'll talk soon.